How do you explain Japan? Just got done watching a video. The guy was saying, inflation's coming, get used to your dollar being worth less because the government spending. That's maybe, but we have evidence right before us right now. It's Japan. And there's only a couple explanations that can be made. One is the demographics. I get it. They're an older population. Well, we are going older too, right? And it's actually interesting because I've been part of my book on Retire on Wellington Fund. I show you the devastation of inflation, all right, from the 66 to 82 time frame. And I show you how the Great Depression wasn't nearly as bad as what a lot of people make it seem to be. It just wasn't. In fact, the two scenarios, 66 to 82 and 1929 to 1940, you'd much rather have been investing in 1929 to 1940. It's just that simple, because that's mass deflation, or otherwise known as a depression. Now, so the idea would be, well, there's a deflation depression because the velocity of money stops. People aren't spending, people aren't consuming, people aren't borrowing, whatnot. I absolutely think that's true. Absolutely. And then the other would be there's a massive inflation because government spending put more money in the economy, which is now being used to buy other things, because you have the same supply, but you have an increase in demand. And when you have the same supply and an increase in demand, that makes prices go up. So if the government's printing money and they're essentially dropping it from a helicopter bin, and now you have $10 where before you only had $5, you're more willing to spend an extra $5 because you just literally just showed up in your lap. And that will make prices go higher. All right, that's true. So government spending is inflationary. All right, that doesn't take a rocket science to make that equation, but it's all based on consumer demand. People are not demanding, i.e. they're not spending, they're not making and putting that money into the economy and increasing the velocity of money. So government spending in of itself, there's not a 100% correlation to inflation, because government spending is what Japan has been doing relative GDP to debt to GDP for going on 25 years now. An older population, maybe they don't spend as much, as I've said a million times on my YouTube channel, that people have a tendency to reduce their consumption as they age. So if you have an increasing demographics in terms of age, that'd be less likely to have a demand. There's going to be less demand for goods and services, less velocity of money, and then deflation. All right, but that's what's happening in Japan. They're not borrowing. People are just not that interested in mass consumption, and they're certainly not taking debt to do that, regardless of what interest rates are. But the government's still spending. So which one of these? Why is it that the government spending is the one that's the fallacy here when it comes to inflation? Older population, they don't consume as much, they save more. Higher savers, less consumption, older. Right? Does any of this sound like what we're going into in the United States? Older population, they don't consume as much, as we can see by BLS numbers, and they tend to save more. I mean, it's literally that simple. And you would have to say, well, that's true for Japan. Like, you'd be starting to become a little bit racist there to say it's true for Japan because maybe Japanese people are wired differently. I'm not going down that path, because I don't think that's true at all. I think as the demographics shift to an older population, they spend less. I bet that's across the board, regardless of your heritage or ethnicity. So the idea that government spending is inflationary, well, we just say that's simply not true. There's not a 100% correlation. There's not, because Japan proves that it's not, without question. So on the other hand, well, you could even make an argument, which is I think what we have to make, as I've said a couple times on my YouTube channel before. The government spending is not a stimulus in any stretch. A stimulus is you had $5, the helicopter bin is dropping the $5 on you to stimulate you to spend an extra $5. That's not what's happening, my friends. 30 million people without jobs, they are not spending because they have no income. No discretionary income, thus they don't spend. They're buying their basic stuff, their beans and rice, but they're not buying friggin' fillets. Because they used to have discretionary income in which they would consume that and increase the velocity of money. But even that was starting to change. That's what cracks me up is all these people say, oh, we're not saving enough. I don't believe that to be true at all. In fact, someone just emailed me the other day, but I forgot who it was. He showed me that in March, the personal savings rate almost doubled. He asked what I thought about that. I said, yeah, I don't know yet. 1 month is not a trend. I have to see more. But that would be somewhat alarming to me in terms of velocity of money. And the certainly not inflationary. If the personal savings rate has gone to 13% from like 6, and that's before you factor in FICA taxes and whatnot. Of course, you don't pay FICA taxes if you got no job. But that just tells me that people are consuming a hell of a lot less, and that's not inflationary by a stretch of the imagination. In fact, you can even look at the U.S. We have massive amounts of debt to GDP. We broke 100%, I don't know, but we went $1 trillion deficits under Obama and under Trumpster too. And there's no inflation to be seen. So there's another point against it's inflationary, the government spending. We have now, 13 years since Obama, since 2008-9. Tell it, under Bush. No inflation as far as the eye can see. And yet the GDP, the debt to GDP is above 100% for the first time since like the World War II or something like that. And yet no inflation. And everyone says we're not saving enough. Well, that's freaking bullcrap. I've said that a million times a Sunday. When you factor in 7.65 right out of the gate to FICA, that is a savings. That is saving to Social Security and Medicare. That is literally a personal savings. On top of that, they're saving in their own 401ks and whatnot. So if we had a 6% personal savings rate, you add a 7.65 to FICA, that's almost 14% right there. So now you factor in, that's 14% of your income you don't have to consume because you're saving it. Now you add this guy, like I said, he sent this article for the Bureau of Economic Advisors that said the personal savings rate's up to 13% in March. Again, don't know what to make of that. That's not inflationary numbers there, my friends. Not by any stretch of the imagination. And then we go back to Japan. The only way you can say that Japan is different is because they have they're wired differently. And I don't think so. I think what it is as people age, the demographic shift, they don't consume as much. And without as much consumption, inherently that means they're saving more. And it also means there's a slower velocity of money, which is not inflationary. So I would challenge people to just assume inflation's coming because of government spending. We're replacing, not even really dollar for dollar, but we're not stimulating the economy. We're trying to replace what has been taken because of insane laws. It's not a stimulant though. It's an attempt at replacing. A $23 trillion economy that's on its back, a $4 trillion stimulus is not a stimulus, right? That's not a stimulus. That's a half-ass attempt to replace what has been lost. So anyway, I don't think inflation is necessarily coming down the pike anytime soon. Just because government spending does not equate to inflation. You'd have to argue, you'd have to prove why Japan, and hell, even the United States, Europe is a little bit different because they have this austerity program where they can't have deficits above 3% of GDP or something like that. Stupid, but that's what you get for joining into the Davos crowd in the EU. Anyway, you'd have to argue why Japan is different, why the states are different. And I'd be interested in hearing your argument. But I've been thinking a lot about this because I'm just crunched the numbers. I'm looking at Japan. The last time is in 1990-91 where they had like 3% inflation. And they've averaged, off the top of my head, it's like 0.49% since then. Whew, it's bad. It's ugly, man. 10-year treasury is still negative, and yet the debt to GDP is through the roof. How do you make that claim? So what are we looking at there? Is there any sign that Japan is going back into an inflationary state, given that the debt to GDP has been through the roof for so long? I guess people say, well, they buy their own bonds. Well, what do you think we do in the United States? They don't have as much immigration? All right. Okay, that would be an argument. All right, well, what's our demographics? Even with our insane immigration rules, are our demographics younger or older? Well, they're certainly still going older. That's without question. And same with all of Europe. Our demographics are aging. China, aging. Even with immigration. So how do you argue? Yeah, love to hear your thoughts. All right, we'll see you.